All right, here we go. Springfield.
Going to church.
Going to church
What
all
would
day.
you be wearing on December 23rd?
Oh, so December 23rd, 1659 was a cold day. And boy, do you think the women woke up and made breakfast? They must have. Because what they're
Yes.
going to do is going to sit at church all day and get one little break where they can go across to and get some. Maybe they went home too. And then go back in church for the rest of the day.
Well, it's funny because when you read the trials and stuff, when they're complaining that, oh, so-and-so didn't go to church, or Hugh Parsons came to my house first and we smoked a pipe before we went to church, it seems like people are wandering in and out quite a bit of church. And in the beginning, I know they were like you had to be there or you were going to be punished. But that was 1636. They've been there 20 years now. So maybe things are more lax, but church does take all day.
It does take all day. And I know that even all the way up until this time, so my last court record thing I did was 1658. People were still getting in trouble for not going to church even then, or leaving, or the only reason you could miss church is if you were set up as a guard or you had a watch.
Okay.
So you were up on the roof. Maybe you could still hear the sermon if you were up there, because the picture of the town meeting house had the two towers. One was for the bell and one's for the watch. So somebody could stand up there. I'm not sure if they could hear the preacher in the winter, maybe not. So if you didn't go to church, you could get fined. And it wasn't just you didn't even have to be part of the religion. Everybody had to go to church. Everybody in the town had to go to church, even if you weren't ever going to be a Puritan or of their faith. But that would affect where you get to sit too, So yeah, I like to picture the women making their smushed up corn maze with water porridge thing, and everybody eating that before they go. And then they get in their woolen, scratchy clothes and tuck their hair up in their caps, because you weren't allowed to have your hair showing at all. In the movies, they always have, like,
oh yeah,
cap and
and the 60s pilgrims have the bouffant
yes, the eyeliner, and the
70s have the straight hair.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I wanted to watch Last of the Mohicans, but then I just couldn't get past and they didn't look like.
No, it didn't look like a romantic
view.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So they did that, and they got their kids all ready, and they went to church.
And who was the preacher at this time?
It was Deacon Chapin.
Okay.
He was the preacher. So they didn't have an official. So in the beginning, it was Moxon, Moxone. And at this time in 1659, he probably, I don't think he's there anymore. But Deacon Chapin is the one who's presiding. I could be wrong.
Nope, you're right, because it says Goodwife Chapin sits with Mrs. Glover and Mrs.
Holyoke. I did find out a little bit. I think those two women, their husbands were mucky mucks. They had gotten a promotion, and I think they actually they traveled a lot. So I think they went around to different churches or had to go in and be in courts. Yeah. So that's probably why they got to sit there, because they had prominent husbands.
So at this point in time, would Deacon Chapin have been brought into this community? Were the people paying him in firewood, or what was the structure of?
So he comes into the town originally just as Samuel Chapin. So he's just a guy. So he's he's a wealthy guy. He gets his house and his land, and he becomes prominent. So that we're talking 1659 right now. So 1636, I mean, that's a lot of years where he kind of, and then you're made deacon.
So he's the guy in charge as we walk into church on this day.
Yes.
And we will talk about him more later, but I'll throw up a picture of his fantastic sculpture where he looks like Lord of the Rings.
And everybody has seen it. I remember it from elementary school when they talk about the Puritans. It's always the man with the big cape and the feathered hat. Always like their hats are jaunty to the side, and that's Deacon Chapin. That's so even just throughout New England and just as a stereotypical Puritan, that's the image, and it's him. So he must have been a fancy dresser.
When we visited Springfield, he's covered in buildings where his sculpture is. So you walk around a corner and all of a sudden you see the sculpture up there with his arms spread wide and his cape flowing out and his hat, and he looks freaky, like scary. So, I mean, it's kind of helps us understand a little bit more of the power structure involved. How deacon, he might have started as Samuel Chapin, and now he's a deacon. And this level of self-importance when you're still sitting in a dirt hut, basically, and starving to death, but
Yeah.
you're in charge of all these people. Like, picture all your neighbors in your neighborhood. You get to decide who gets to sit on the first seat at church and who doesn't. And that's a lot of power.
Especially from a town that and a whole culture, not just Springfield, but I mean, you could get fined for having too lacy of a collar, or if you did dress too nicely for church, you could get fined. There's a whole group of people that were brought in, I think it was in Salem, and they weren't just teenagers, they were just like 6 people that got arrested for dressing too nicely.
Really? So,
So the fact that his statue is this fabulous cape and beautiful outfit is so I wonder what he thought about it. He must have posed for it or something.
he had to have asked for it. Like, he knew it was happening. So,
I assume.
so we're going to talk about, okay, so I got you off track, but let's
I love it. Get me off. I'm better off track than on track.
Me too.
I know more off track stuff. I can't tell you who the preacher was that day, but I can tell you what.
Visions that Stephen saw the night before he went to
I
church.
can tell you all that. Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, so the way the seating chart goes, and do we want to put it up? And we can talk about it for people that are on audio too. Okay, so in the very first seat is Henry Burt. And Henry Burt is, he's also, well, here's what's interesting. We know who came over on the boat, 1630, lived in Roxbury, which is by Boston, kind of established this group. That was Pynchon, that was Miles Morgan was part there. I think he was as a servant. You had the Burts, you had even the guy in charge of Deerfield, John Williams, who's famous for being captured. And so anyway, we'll talk about him later, but really prominent, strong people came from Roxbury over to Springfield in 1636 and helped establish it. And let's go back to everything they did in establishing it in a minute. But when they're sitting in this church building in 1659, it's what, 30 years later, 33 years later.
Okay, now we've got to do math. So
23 years later. 1636
minus 1659. Are you doing it by hand?
23 years later. So that's not too bad.
23 years later.
Yes. So these people have been through a lot together. And still, the seating chart doesn't show who. It's not by how long you've lived there. It's how well you've done in the community. How much money you've made, how much land deals you've made. um, if you're if you've converted and confessed all your sins and, you're saved. So you've got people that have helped found this town not sitting in the first pew, which is interesting.
And explain to me how the pews were set up. Like, did families sit together, or
Well,
how was that arranged?
I think this is that first little meeting house again with the two towers. And so and later they got a fancier church. But I think this is where they really did have, it's pews. Yeah. And women on one side, men on the other side, women and children on one side, all the men on the other side, which is something we kind of talked about before about if the wives so there was a voted on selectman group who chosen by Deacon Chapin, who chose where men sat. And so there was meetings about who got to sit where. A lot of the people sitting up front were on this group of men who got to choose it. And so, and it was on money, status. A lot of it was if somebody was in trouble or had been brought in, sued too many times, or so then we were talking, which was interesting, when the wives come in and there's no seating chart for the wives, so there's only a seating chart for the men. And you were saying that a lot of the wives would maybe walk in and see where the men were. They knew the order of the men.
Yeah. The women had to match. So you have like a mirrored image. You have two rows of benches. One side is the men, one side is the women. So wherever your husband sat, you had to match that on the bench opposite. So the hierarchical pattern is repeated for both genders. So the husband and then the wife. And it's true they did this every year, right? Didn't they record it changed?
Yeah, I couldn't find records of it. The two that I found were for 1659 and then for 1662, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if they did it every year or if I'm sure they had to change it as people died and as people moved in. But I couldn't find the actual seating chart records for those other years. So
it's probably easy to assume with the amount of litigation they did that we'll get into later that it was a pretty dynamic, like maybe you'd walk in and not, now we're in the third row.
Right.
Because
maybe
Gertrude wore that lace thing.
Yes, right.
Or
And the things they were suing each other about really are Thomas didn't move the pile of wood far enough against my house, or he didn't fix the fence. And that's the other thing. We will talk about this right now, because what's interesting is all these people sitting here at church. This is the seating chart for the men, which is also interesting that the men, it was mandatory that they sat like this. The women just did it, right? They didn't have to sit in that order if they didn't want to. I'm assuming they just would, right? There was no law for the woman. No,
but I think they were self-regulated, because I remember reading, well, the one I read about the lady coming and you're in my seat, and they basically pushed her away and shoved her, and
so self-regulating. That's
might have been self-regulating,
which I hate.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I don't want to take you off track for a minute.
Take me off track, because I love it.
In my mind, they are the way we know about them is from all the lawsuits they had on each other. So we don't have the journals. We don't have a lot to go on other than the way they regulated themselves.
Right.
Like thick books you have two thick books full of court records.
Full of lawsuits.
Yes.
This is a diary, so it's kind of abbreviated. These are the actual
And which books are those?
So this is, speaking of Henry Burt, so Henry Burt is in the very first seat at church with us today in 1659. He was in charge. He was the Clark, Clark, which means clerk, I'm pretty sure.
Clark. Clark.
And so he was in charge of their records. So he was in charge of all their court records, also their kind of budget. So when it came time to publish something about Springfield, they used all of his records to make this book. So this is the first century of the history of Springfield. They say it's by William Pynchon and Henry Martin Burt, but the guy who compiled these all from 1636 to 1736, so 100 years, was Henry Burt, who's our guide.
He's our first lady that got us. Mary Burt is the first. We were trying to chant following the mother egg line up the thing.
Yep.
She came out first in a huge way.
Yeah, so. And I'm starting to love her.
I am too.
Mm-hmm.
We were pretty hard in our first few discussions, and we'll get to her. We'll get to her, but
we can show
we're
clips.
Pretty harsh on her, and we can show that. I maybe I'll mark her.
Yeah, I was very excited that she was a sex addict, and so that was scandalous, and she got whipped naked for having a baby
while being pregnant. And she and her sister, who are our relatives, the first ones we met in the 1600s colonies, were two of the three women whipped for lasciviousness, right? In that year, or fornication? Ever.
In that town.
Ever in Springfield. So, as we discussed about her, that was interesting. Like, you don't think of your Pilgrim grandmother being whipped naked in the town square. So,
and I will admit, Family Search is a pretty dry place. So when you come across this woman who is, well, the way she's handled too in the history is written about her. She's either not talked about at all, or it's kind of a wink, like here's our ancestor, and yep, and they kind of censor it, and then you have some that are like, she was whipped because the court record is she sued Samuel Wright Jr. Samuel Wright's father, by the way, is a fancy pants man, and
is he in the church here?
He's not in the church anymore. I think he was not there alive anymore.
Okay.
Anyway, she had sex with him and got pregnant with him. He must have been not wanting to marry her or be a dad to the baby.
When we get into this, remember, Samuel Wright Jr. is married Mary Burt's older sister, Elizabeth, who also got whipped. And so when you first hear the story, I think was maybe Mary Burt was 18 or 19 at the time the court record tells us all about it. She was pregnant, and her brother-in-law, who's married to Elizabeth, or her older sister, her father Wright Jr. to court and sued him in Mary's name for getting her pregnant. Now, should I confirm that? Is that true?
We can confirm it, but I think it's true. Either Henry sued him or she did.
Yeah.
And during the they do it in front of a jury. Normally, even the 12 jury thing was a lawful thing back then, but on the frontier, they only had to have 6 people that were on the jury. And a lot of times the people being convicted of things also were on the jury.
Really?
Uh-huh.
Well, because there's not a lot of people.
There's not a lot of people, and there's not a lot of, the jury had to be, it wasn't that you got jury duty and little Mary, the milkmaid, had to come in for jury duty. It was always these same 6 prominent men who were on, not always, but normally every jury, when you look through it, who sat on the jury, it's always the same guy, and it's Wright, Samuel Wright, the dad, and it's Brooks, and it's Bert, and it's Stebbins, and it's just the same names over and over on the jury. So yeah, I guess should have another episode on all the court cases. But with Mary, her record, who she is as a person is what she did as a amorous young woman. That's her legacy.
I mean, that's the unfortunate thing, and one of the reasons we're doing this is, and I get scared. I'm getting older, and I think, what's going to filter down to my descendants? Like, my worst thing I did in high school, is that what they're going to be talking about? And I really had that feeling with Mary Burt, that she was willing to let us talk about it because it's there. It's how we found her. But the thing I feel the most important about her is to flesh her out enough that we can get in her head. And she did go on to marry and have 12 something children with another man, of long marriage. She was an upstanding citizen. She was very, very, very lucky, because most of the women in her situation, which was fairly common in all these records of getting pregnant or having a baby, and it didn't matter if the man was married, like Samuel Wright Jr. Let me think about this for a minute. If the woman was married, that's adultery. If the man was married, he's not punished as harshly as the woman. So Mary Burt's punishment and Samuel Wright Jr.'s punishment were basically the same. 30 lashes, a fine. But what you see, I think, is something that we're going to see over and over again, is how power structure worked in these colonial communities. Because most of the things I've read, most of the examples of women who are pregnant or fornicated, they either, that come to court, they either disappear back into their families' houses and never heard from again. You're not going to get married. If they marry the guy that got them pregnant, they both will get like a fine or something, but things work out for her a little better.
Yeah.
Mostly though, they disappear. Like, they don't get to live a life anymore. And so in this case, we see what's interesting, coming back to the church roster, we see Henry Burt sitting in the front seat, which means he's a very influential man. And we see him acting for his daughter, Mary Burt. And this was only 4 years before, when she went to court. Do we remember?
Yeah, so she went to court. I have it. Mary, I can look it up on my wonderful thing. Let me sort by name. 1655. So 4 years before this is when she was charged. Samuel Wright Jr. fathered her illegitimate child. She won, but was whipped for her evil behavior with Samuel Wright. And during the jury process, it also came out that she had slept with Joseph Bond, Shee. So she actually got double punishment, because they found out she'd slept with someone else in that same trial. But like you're saying, any other woman, that would have been, scandalous. There's in Deerfield, just around this time, maybe a little bit after, maybe, there's a woman named Sarah who, her husband got captured by by a tribe, taken up to Canada. She's living alone in her house. She ends up basically getting raped. So major abuse, and she gets through that, and then she falls in love with some guy, has a baby, miscarries the baby, maybe the baby didn't live. and she ended up being sentenced and hung and executed for that, for behaving. And because she was just some poor little
And she was a
chick
married
with no
woman.
husband, and she was a married woman. Ooh, yeah.
So
Okay.
why wasn't Samuel Wright hung?
Right. Interesting. And Mary Brooks, Mary Burt, not only she had it was terrible. I would not want to get whipped twice.
Naked and
Well,
pregnant.
I'm pregnant, but that same year, right? She marries one of the coolest guys in town, Brooks.
Yeah.
I don't have that marriage. I don't have the marriage.
Who
chart.
is she got a really, when you look back at it, first of all, we will get into the whole dynamics of, did she ask for it, or did she, was she raped, or was she lascivious, or we can get into all that, but we know it wasn't. We have to think about it through their eyes first as historians. So we can judge it, but we just have. What I had forced myself to do was read the actual court records of Mary Burt and the words they used to describe it. And Henry and Mary Burt, in her witness statement, says that Samuel Wright Jr. entered her body 3 times. Okay, so they're just laying it out there, and we don't. So the point is, what should have happened. So here we are, 1659, sitting in this church. Is Brooks? Brooks lives in a different town. No, William Brooks is there.
He's there.
Okay.
But he's not on the first. He's back
No.
in the he's on the 7th row.
Okay, so we have Henry Burt, who's his wife's father, who 4 years ago, Mary Burt was on trial for lasciviousness and fornication, evil doings, and what with her brother-in-law, who remained married to Abigail Burt.
Yes, and Samuel Wright. He got in trouble. He wasn't such a great guy. His dad, Samuel Wright Sr., was just like I said, he was one of the founders. He was an upstanding, respected man. His son, Junior, who is the guy that entered Mary 3 times,
Mm-hmm.
he was sued for calling his dad his old elderly dad, bad names, and kind of saying, I think that was him. So anyway, he's kind of a schmuck, but
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And for that matter, we'll talk about Abigail, his wife, who was also shows up in court as being lascivious.
yeah.
Which tells me that Henry Burt had remarkable influence in that community, because in reading about, we can list cases, or I can link them to the show notes or whatever, but how his 2 daughters continued to live in that community, continued to show up on the church records, even though Mary Brooks's husband is in the 7th row. There's 10 rows total, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
And
means
this is just 4 years after he married her, so he
4
becomes
years.
more established later on. So
Okay.
I think if we look at the, I can look real quick.
While you're looking, I'll just say, so Mary Burt, right after this happens, she is pregnant. She's whipped while she's pregnant, and then the second time she's supposed to get whipped, she pays a fine and somehow gets out of it. She then marries William Brooks in that same year. He's older. He's like 40 something when she marries him. So I think he saved her life, really. The fact that she can sit in that church 4 years later on a bench with her husband. And we also noticed from Mary Burt, the daughter. Okay, so the court record, the fine for Samuel Wright Jr. was whipping, and he was actually ordered to pay child support. for the
Right.
child for 7 years and then provide an apprenticeship. So
Hmm.
we don't know at that point if the child is male or female during the court trial. I
Right.
have dry mouth.
Because it's like child support even back then,
Which
you
is
know.
remarkable.
Hmm.
And they're living in, as we'll talk about, they're living in this spooky, crazy, starving, crazy women land, and they're still using some of their English laws, some of their Welsh laws,
Yes.
some of the Indian laws, they're living in this weird liminal space, this world that nothing quite clicks, but still they're able to talk about child support. And Mary Burt is ordered to keep the child, which is a strong
Hmm.
statement, which comes into when we start talking about the witch trials and things. There's a lot of death in this community, those people sitting in that church today. There's been a lot of suffering and a lot of sadness. And we are talking about the 1600s,
Right.
which you can't imagine how lucky we are to be able to sit here. You think the 1800s are far away. These are the 1600s. So you and I, our job is to get into that world, and let our listeners into it without our 20th century
Yes.
biases. But to me, it's these little things that stand out in history the most. The fact that she was ordered to keep her child. And what did she name that child?
Remembrance, right?
Remembrance.
Uh-huh.
So one descendant speculated she wanted Samuel Wright to always remember what he had done.
Yes.
And it's interesting, she was married to William Brooks when she had Remembrance. He raised
Hmm.
her as their child. And somehow the story for Mary Burt worked out that she was wronged. Like she got recompense in a way that most women
No, I
in that
wouldn't have gotten
situation
that.
would never have gotten.
I guess in my head, when I picture the Puritans, I picture them as uh just flat people, just until we start reading about this. And one of the first things I really liked reading about is how they respected childhood. That they didn't have these babies just to be their slaves or workers. They kind of revered childhood and they let them be children. They worked. I mean, the kids had jobs and it wasn't an easy life, but they had toys. They were set apart as adult. From being an adult, you were a child and you got to be a child. That I thought was really cool. Which then I think, okay, well, no wonder that a judge with a pregnant woman who's accusing a man of fathering her child would think about that baby growing up in its childhood and making sure it's cared for, because it seems like such a modern thing to have childcare and custodial questions given by a judge. And then the other thing you were saying is the question of, were they aborting babies all the time? And they were. This book you got me was awesome. The Medicine and Healing talks a lot about how they brought over their herbal remedies and there were other ways but that was something that was done. So for a judge, like you brought this up before, to say, no, you have to keep your baby, and was interesting, I thought.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the more you read into that, and it became part of the witch trials, that the later ones where they say they found a baby hidden in the forest, or they found babies in random places. And I really like what you're saying, because it does change that flat image of a pilgrim, very stoic, and um, into a community that values children in a way that I didn't think of 17th century English people valuing children. Because I think of the child workers in the factories and the beggars on the street and those kind of images, and the harshness of their punishments and their life there.
Yeah,
Yeah, the fact that the kids had toys, and the fact that a judge would care about that.
right. is cool. I like it a lot. And uh, they're living in my mind, they're living like children. They're living under strict rules. They have to do this, they have to do that. They have to ask permission even to move a pile of wood from one side of their yard. It's like they're living in a glorious HOA or something, you know? And which makes, in my head, makes them, what's the word? It's not infant, I don't know, where you turn adults into children, basically. There's a
Yeah,
word I used to throw around all the time, but
yeah.
and so then to set apart even then further the children, um, I don't know, maybe that's why it was such a shock. I don't know, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But how I just thought that was cool. And the education, they were teaching their kids how to read. They weren't just little slave
Mhm.
worker bees that they were giving birth to. They were uh, their future, you know?
And their assets.
Right.
And what you're saying makes me think about Henry Burt. And if he's on the jury, and if those other men hold him in high esteem, they would value his progeny because it was important to him.
Yeah. Even
So
a daughter, even two
yeah,
daughters,
and
which
the
is cool.
baby,
Mm-hmm.
which is an interesting thing because you just don't see that. And I guarantee John Harmon in seat 10, his daughter probably wouldn't get that treatment,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, so in a lot of ways, Mary Burt's story is very interesting because how this sad story of the brother-in-law entering her 3 times and pregnant is somehow smoothed over, and in the end, the child is protected, not thrown in a forest.
Yeah.
And 4 years later, they're all sitting in the church together.
Think how weird that jury was, because Samuel Wright probably questioned whether it was his baby or not. That's why he throws in this Shay guy. I mean, it must have been horrible for her because that was discovered during the trial that she's had another guy. So just, I don't know. I feel bad for her.
Yeah, I do too. And but I also feel like if her father was that powerful, maybe you would think he would at first try to keep it quiet, the
Hmm.
father, and smooth it over and get it resolved. But maybe she wanted it out there, maybe
Yeah.
he wanted that story told because she spoke in the trial.
Record says it's her complaint. So that's their terminology for suing. So it's her name that's complaining, is bringing forth the complaint against Samuel Wright Jr.
So to do that, you have to be ready to tell the whole world that that this happened to you, and you would have had to be pretty confident, um, and righteously indignant, maybe, that this had happened. And
Yeah.
even if she'd wanted to be entered 3 times by Samuel
I
Wright,
know. It
um,
makes me feel like maybe she wasn't into it. The fact that she thought, because women were doing that, women were trying to attempt to accuse a rapist, and it was hard to do. It was that other case in your Good Wives book of the woman who tries to accuse the man, and didn't she didn't they
oh,
didn't he was a fancy doctor, so they
I
just
couldn't find any other cases that ended as happily, not happily, but ended as well for Mary as Mary's case did.
that and it's hard to find cases where a man is actually accused of rape.
Yeah.
It's usually turned into something else, or the woman's at fault or blame, or it's
I mean, and you still see that because she's whipped pregnant twice, naked, like stripped down to your waist in the post in front of the church in the Sound Square and whipped 15 times, right?
mhm.
I think that says a lot about Mary Burt, who doesn't, she said all she needed to say in court, maybe, and maybe she just didn't want you and I to spend a whole episode laughing about her.
I know. Because I thought because it's a so court. the town is law and religion. They're so enmeshed. So if you go to court, it's like going to see your confession or to, it kind of. And if your whole, like you were saying, if my whole legacy is going to be based off of things I've had to confess, then yeah, I'm a big hoe, So it's like, and that's it. I'm not a mother. I'm nothing else. I'm just this
Yeah.
girl that,
Yeah.
that's it. That's my legacy. So it's, and then I was trying to move it forward to be like, well, it's so different now. Now people would not hear that about me. They would also know that I don't know, I have a cat or whatever. Just other things about me. But is that true? Do we still only remember the scandalous or the tea on people more than, I mean, is that just what the highlight of a person is? I don't know.
I think it's, I mean, Laurel Thatcher Ulrich in her Good Wife book does a whole study on the wording behind someone's headstone and how a wife is always just
Yeah,
honorable and faithful. And you read in some of the pioneer tributes in the Mormon faith, it's always a steady, steadfast, faithful woman. But you don't hear, if you hear anything bad or anything slightly that, like, oh, that's interesting, they never say that. That is a something to follow, because finally you get a little bit of the real person down in there.
right.
But I think we still have to be respectful, and what we're doing is, Mary Burt may have lived in 16 whatever, but she was 19 and entered 3 times by her brother-in-law, where there's no privacy in these places,
Mm-mm.
none at all.
The
And
homes
so,
are, yeah, the homes are at this time basically one room,
yeah,
kind
right?
of, yeah, and then
But
a
they're
loft.
comfortable.
Yeah, they're all, the place you eat and the place you visit is also the place some people sleep, and it's just, and it was, um to not paint it then as like some, there were people fell in love and people were attracted and people went off in the woods and had sex and came back with the green stains or whatever,
The grass stains on yeah.
and there were people, if I guess depending on the couple, would kind of be like, or so it wasn't this, again, and not a flat place. There was
Right,
attraction, and
right.
women weren't always being taken, and they sometimes wanted to, and so I don't know, it's just, but like what you're saying, it's what happens to the woman, and Mary got really lucky, I think, because her dad is sitting on the front row for sure.
Yeah, and she clearly married to this Brooks guy for years and had
Mhm.
10 something children, and raised this remembrance, and stayed in within the social structure of the town. She was not banished. She was allowed to be a
Right.
functioning. She shows up in later records, as a full good wife in the town. So somehow, she overcame that. And that speaks a lot to the proximity of power, the power dynamics going on. Because can you just tell me a little bit about who in that church? We always picture that they're all Puritans, they all came over on the same boat, they're all in this community for a reason. But what, I mean, I don't know if we want to get into the nature of the community, but they're not all Puritans, right?
No. In fact, so William Brooks is in the 7th row. So you've got an 8th row, a 9th row, and the 10th row, and there are 6 men to a seat on each row, except for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 10th row has 7 people. One of the guys sitting on the 10th row is the deacon's son. So age
Oh,
does come in a little bit, like the younger, not, I guess, teenage, but maybe 20s, single. And then you'd have the servant sitting back there too. But you had an Abel Wright in the ninth seat. So a Wright is a prominent name. Dudley is a prominent name. Samuel Bliss, Bliss families are prominent. And so you're getting a mixture of the younger people up and coming. Like 8th seat is even. Francis Pepper is kind of a, I wouldn't say troublemaker, but he went to court a couple times. But Warner, James Warner in the 8th row is a good family name. We have Obadiah Miller, though, who's older, and he has a problem with his wife. She's the one calling him vermin and that she never loved him and she hates him. And he should be by his age, and he's not. I mean, they have land. He should probably be a couple rows up, but he's back here in the 8th seat because everybody knows their business. And,
So his
Nathan
wife probably had something to do with that.
Yeah, so I don't even know where she's sitting. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see who wanted to. She was a problem. She's related. She's Our Lady too. We're related to her too. She's sitting next to Nathaniel Burt, who was 22 years old at the time. Oh, not she. Obadiah Miller is sitting next to a 22-year-old who's a Burt. So he's an up and comer. He's Mary's brother. I think he actually he's the one that goes to Deerfield during the.
He gets massacred.
Yeah.
His wife gets hatcheted right in front of him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But that's not for a few more years. He doesn't know it yet, but
he doesn't know it yet.
Trouble.
And she does, Mary Burt again. She was dead by the time she lived through the King Philip's War, but by the time that Deerfield was massacred, I mean, one of her grandsons was captured by, I think, the Mohican and never heard from again. Not reported as dead. That all accounts say that he just liked it and stayed with the Mohican tribe, and was a Mohican, And so she's got amazing legacy, even just as grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then right in front of the Obadiah Miller, who's a troublemaker, sitting next to Mary's brother, who's just young, is William Brooks, Mary's husband.
Okay.
So, and the people in his row they're not bad. They're good people. The people in the 6th seat, you've got another Bliss and a Thomas Miller. They have good names. Ahead of them is John Clark, who is awesome. He is, but he's the son of an awesome guy who we're related to, John Clark. But this John Clark, he's probably sitting in this seat because he was the one that sold beer to the Indians, or strong drink to two Indian men who ended up shooting each other. So he was sued for that, and it was a big problem. And one of the findings is that you don't have a license to sell liquor to anybody. I told you this, I think. You don't have a license to sell liquor to anybody. And you know how the Native Americans are really bad with their drinks. So don't sell it to them because you don't have a license. But keep selling it to the English because we can hold our drink. And so even though it's illegal for you to sell it at all, you can keep selling it to us because we know how to. So
yeah.
It's just, and every seat has a story. The 4th seat is Thomas Gilbert. We'll get into him. Jonathan Burt then he was 34 at the time. So here we're coming forward. I'm working from the back forward, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I assume I'd be sitting in the back, looking at the back of all these people's heads.
Yeah, we'd be in the back row for a naughty
nursing. Lady. Yeah,
nursing.
Women, yeah. And that's the other thing. Women could whip it out and nurse right in church. That wasn't a taboo thing. It was just totally.
And there were lots of complaints on the women's side because you sat like your body was touching the other person. It was like a really tight plane ride.
And little kids crawling all over you, I'm sure. All their kids had to go.
Like crying and okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
For hours. 4 hours, and you get a break, and then 4 hours again. And then you had to go back on Thursday. It wasn't church, but it was lecture day. And basically do it all over again. It was just and so and just so anyway, it as you go further up, see, this is in the second seat. Here's the thing I was mad about. This Thomas Merrick in the second seat is absolutely a wife beater and a kid beater. He's on the record. He had witnesses talk about it. He's just a yucky dude, but he was wealthy. So he's on the second seat, sitting next to another Warrener, William Warrener, who's a fancy guy, sitting right behind Roland Stebbins, who, so.
Yeah, so what makes him, did he have more acreage or something?
Yeah, why is Obadiah Miller sitting in the back? Because his wife's a freak, but this guy is openly, and it wasn't that was okay. Puritans were not okay with wife beating and child beating. So that's another thing, is that to flesh them out a little bit. They weren't a harsh that way.
But I was thinking about that. Like what did they see abuse as or whatever? Because I guess if the husband's beating, he still retains his seat, but the wife's doing the beating with Obadiah Miller and he's in the 8th seat. That speaks more to me like you can't keep your business in control. Like you can't.
That's probably
keep your wife. And in
Merrick, yeah.
And there's sources that discuss that they were very physical with each other. Like to us, it would seem like they were all beating each other every minute, but they were very physical, like wives hitting kids with spoons, and in a way that we would see as totally unacceptable. So that's something I guess we could talk about at some point.
Yeah, because I wonder if it was used when they wanted to. Was accused by one of the Agam, the tribe across the rivers, that he had hit. I don't want to spread rumors. I got to find out who was the one that hit. I'll find it out. But he had hit an Indian woman with a stick twice and brought into court.
Guy.
I see. That's why I got to make sure it really was. I can look at my list. Thomas Merrick, what did you do? Oh, he's on there. Okay, so on the list, okay, from 1639 to 1655, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. He was in court 11 times, mostly because he was accused of something. Yeah, so, and he was also he was a constable too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could talk about that at a later date, another topic for that. But yeah, that's an interesting area to get into. Okay.
You have to go in a minute.
Okay, so to wrap this up, I know you prepared more, so go ahead, you take it away and wrap it up for us.
Well, I think everything I'm prepared to do is just move forward with this town. And coming back to church, I think this won't be our only time coming back to church with them, because it's where we have them all lined up in a row. And the ones highlighted are people we're related to.
So out of all those people in that room that morning in 1659, how many are we related to?
We're related to Deacon Chapin. We're related to Henry Burt. We're related to Roland Stebbins. I'll just do the Mucky Mucks, and then Roland Stebbins was a prominent person, and the Stebbins house in Deerfield is his son's house. Benjamin Cooley. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We're not related to Thomas Merrick. 1, 2, 3, 4.
But
5, 6. Miles Morgan. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and then 17 for sure, by marriage and stuff, maybe more.
17 out of how many people are named in this? How many men?
There's 6 people per seat, and there's
this is math.
9 seats.
So if 54? I were smart, so 17 out of, we're thinking 54 men count, and then add their women and children. we're in the room with them DNA wise.
DNA wise, big time.
Yeah.
We're
That's
all over that
bizarre.
place. Because
And I never knew that.
Yeah, and this is coming from one line. We've also got the Crowther line who puts us back over here in Deerfield too.
You're right.
So
you're right, because we have got the Bliss. We've got, yeah. This is a good place to start. And
Yeah.
for me, I never even thought I had to deal with this colonial issue. Now I've got to wrestle with that. I had to wrestle with the Mormon pioneers, and now it's a total.
This is where we have a bigger thing to deal with coming soon.
Don't get on the ship, girls. Just lovely, quiet life. You're in the 1600s. No one will know what you did.
Right. Yeah.
Get on the ship and you come over here. You're gonna have two chicas talking about you.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
But we love you. But so this is fascinating. We are gonna get into these people, right?
Oh, for sure. And so next episode, let's go home a little bit or pick a person, whatever speaks to us, and let's talk about them. Now that we have them before us, let's see where we go, because there's some really interesting, there's so much. This town is just, and we need to get into the Agawam people and what they were doing across the river. They're fascinating. They were kind of pioneers, the way they dealt with food and their lifestyle. It's just cool. It was a cool place.
It's a really fertile place for history, and a lot of these, I'm excited to hear how women dealt with all this and how their families dealt, and that because one thing you think about this day, this town, this group of people has already been through the first witch trials in Massachusetts.
They were the hub of it. These people sitting in this church put Hugh Parsons in jail and Mary Parsons in jail. They testified against her being a witch.
6 years ago.
Yeah. So these people sitting in this church have already what's the word with the witch? 2 witches.
Condemned a witch. They had their own witch trials in that same meeting house.
Yeah.
And they've all testified against each other. They're all mad at each other about stuff. So this town not only just arrived on a ship and appeared and stayed, to the Agawam people's consternation, took over their fields, took over their land. They've prosecuted witches.
Yes.
In this room, sitting there, is Gilbert in here right now?
Yeah, Thomas Gilbert's in the 4th seat.
So in the 4th
sitting next to Jonathan Burt, who testified against Hugh Parsons.
Yeah, so in the 4th seat, we have a man sitting there who 4 years ago watched his wife get hung on Elm Street on a tree for witchcraft. And he was lucky enough to be able to move to Springfield and marry a cute lady, and
the deacon's daughter,
who we're related to, and went on with trying to get on with his life.
Yeah.
So, and then this same town, in how many years will the war be?
75. But they are attacked before that too. But yeah, King Philip's War, they're completely. And also, Thomas Gilbert is sitting next to Jonathan Burt, who's sitting directly behind Miles Morgan, who just had a baby. Well, has a 4-year-old girl sitting over with Prudence, who's named after the witch that got. She's not a witch, but she could have been a witch. She was
pretty witchy.
Lydia, you're next. You can deal with entering 3 times, but yeah. So
yeah, I mean, witch or entered 3 times. I don't know what's first. So.
All right, awesome. So let's do that next time. We'll go.
Sarah, good work on this. I can't believe you listing all those people that belong to us in that one room, and you know all their stories, and we're gonna weave them together. So yeah. So we'll leave them at church.
Yeah, they liked it there.
Yeah, and then we will follow one of them home next week and keep
Okay.
going.